The co-star Doris Day could never forgive. America's sweetheart harbored a secret resentment that lasted until the day she died. For decades, Doris Day smiled through interviews about her legendary on-screen romance with Rock Hudson. The perfect pair. Hollywood's golden couple. 3 films that defined an era of romantic comedy. But behind that famous smile was anger, betrayal, a sense of having been used that she carried for more than 50 years. I felt like a fool, she finally admitted late in life. And I don't like being made a fool of. The man Doris Day hated more than anyone wasn't a villain or a rival. He was her most celebrated co-star. The actor the world believed she adored. And what he did to her in her eyes was unforgivable. Not because of who he was, but because of the lie she was forced to live. Doris Day was born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff on April 3, 1922 in Cincinnati, Ohio. She grew up in a modest middle-class household during the Great Depression. From an early age, she displayed infectious enthusiasm for performance, initially dreaming not of Hollywood or recording studios, but of becoming a professional dancer. Dance was her first great passion, and she trained diligently, showing enough promise that she and a partner won local dance competitions. That dream, however, was abruptly and tragically altered when a serious automobile accident shattered her leg and effectively ended her hopes of a dancing career. Yet it was during her long and painful recovery that fate intervened in a different way. Confined to her home, she began singing along to the radio, discovering a natural, effortless vocal talent that would soon become her greatest gift. Encouraged by friends and family, Doris began performing with local bands, eventually catching the attention of a bandleader who suggested she change her surname to Day. This new name marked the beginning of her professional identity. Her breakthrough came in the mid-40s when she joined one of the most popular orchestras of the swing era. With them, Doris Day recorded Sentimental Journey in 1945, a song that became an anthem for returning World War II servicemen and a defining hit of the era. Her warm, clear, and emotionally sincere voice resonated deeply with listeners, instantly setting her apart from other vocalists of the time. Sentimental Journey did more than top the charts. It introduced America to a voice that seemed to embody comfort, optimism, and emotional honesty at a moment when the nation desperately needed all three. Hollywood soon took notice, and in 1948, Doris Day made her film debut. What was initially meant to be a modest acting opportunity quickly blossomed into a major film career. Doris possessed a rare combination of qualities. She was naturally beautiful without seeming remote or intimidating. She radiated sincerity, and she had comic timing that felt instinctive rather than studied. Audiences trusted her, rooted for her, and saw in her a reflection of themselves or the best version of everyday American womanhood. Throughout the 50s, she became one of the most bankable stars in Hollywood, headlining a wide range of films that showcased not only her singing but also her dramatic and comedic abilities. Her dramatic talents reached a high point in 1955 when she portrayed singer Ruth Etting in a biographical film. The role shattered any lingering doubts about her range as an actress, revealing an intensity and emotional depth that surprised critics and audiences alike. Doris Day refused to be confined to a single-screen persona, even though Hollywood often tried to cast her as the eternally cheerful, wholesome girl next door. In a 1956 Alfred Hitchcock thriller, she delivered one of the most unforgettable moments of her career with the song Quest Sarah, Sarah Whatever Will Be, Will Be. The song became her signature, winning an Academy Award and transcending the film itself to become a philosophical anthem about acceptance, fate, and hope. The late 50s and early 60s cemented her status as a romantic comedy icon, particularly through her immensely popular on-screen partnerships with Rock Hudson. Films like Pillow Talk in 1959, Lover Come Back in 1961, and Send Me No Flowers in 1964 defined an era of sophisticated, playful Hollywood romance. Doris Day's comedic performances were marked by sharp intelligence and impeccable timing, and she brought a sense of independence and wit to her roles that subtly challenged the era's gender norms. Beyond her work on screen, Doris Day was also one of the most successful recording artists of the 20th century. She recorded hundreds of songs across pop, jazz, and traditional standards, and she remains one of the best-selling female singers of all time. Her voice, pure, expressive, and emotionally direct, had a timeless quality that allowed her recordings to endure long after musical trends changed. But behind the glamour and the success, Doris Day's personal life was marked by both deep devotion and profound heartbreak, reflected in a series of marriages that shaped her journey as a woman, a mother, and a Hollywood icon. Her first marriage came heartbreakingly early. In 1941, still very young and on the cusp of her rise to fame, Doris married a talented trombonist. What began with hope and romance quickly descended into turmoil. The The marriage produced her only child, a beloved son named Terry, who would remain the emotional center of her life. Behind closed doors, however, the relationship was deeply troubled. Her husband was physically abusive, and Doris endured fear and instability during a period that should have been filled with promise and joy. Summoning remarkable courage and resolve, she ended the marriage in 1943, choosing safety and dignity for herself and her young son. In 1946, Doris tried again, marrying a saxophonist. This second union offered companionship and the possibility of a fresh start, but it struggled under the weight of her rapidly growing stardom. As her career soared and her name became synonymous with wholesome glamour, the marriage faltered. By 1949, the relationship had quietly dissolved, leaving Doris once more to navigate life and love on her own. Her third marriage would become the most significant and the most complex of her life. In 1951, Doris married Martin Melcher, a man who not only became her husband but also deeply intertwined himself with her professional world. Melcher formally adopted her son, embracing the role of father, and went on to produce many of Doris Day's most successful films, helping to shape her image as America's sweetheart. For 17 years, they remained married, a period that coincided with the height of her fame and productivity. Yet beneath the surface of professional success lay a marriage later revealed to be fraught with control and financial mismanagement. Melcher's death in 1968 marked the end of the marriage and the beginning of a painful reckoning for Doris, as she discovered the extent to which her finances had been mishandled during their years together. Despite these disappointments, Doris Day never lost her belief in love. In 1976, she married once more, this time to a restaurateur. The relationship offered the promise of companionship away from the relentless glare of Hollywood, but it too proved unsustainable. By 1981, the marriage had unraveled, bringing her fourth and final union to a close. Across 4 marriages, Doris Day experienced love, loss, betrayal, endurance, and resilience. Though her romantic life was often turbulent, she emerged with her spirit intact, defined not by the failures of her marriages, but by her strength, her devotion to her son, and the grace with which she faced life's deepest trials. But it was her professional relationship with Rock Hudson that would leave the deepest scar, the one she could never quite heal from. If this story about Doris Day touches your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. For decades, Doris Day and Rock Hudson were held up as the ultimate symbol of Hollywood romance, the smiling, perfectly matched leads of their beloved films. To audiences, they embodied effortless charm, sexual tension, and lighthearted love. But behind the studio-crafted illusion, the truth was far more complicated. And in Doris Day's later reflections, it became clear that her feelings toward Hudson were layered with disappointment, anger, and a sense of deep betrayal that she rarely allowed herself to voice publicly. Doris Day was known for her warmth, discipline, and fierce professionalism. She valued honesty above almost everything else, especially in an industry built on facades. "I believed in being straightforward," she once said. "If you didn't have that, you didn't have much." It was this belief that made her eventual emotional break with Rock Hudson so painful. While the two shared impeccable on-screen chemistry, Day came to feel that their friendship had been built on something fundamentally false. At the time of their films together, Day was unaware that Hudson was gay, a fact carefully hidden by the studio system. When the truth became public years later, she was deeply shaken. Not because of Hudson's sexuality itself, but because of the deception that surrounded it. "It wasn't what he was," she later said. "It was that everyone knew but me." To Doris Day, the realization felt humiliating. She believed she had been used as a prop in a carefully constructed lie designed to protect the studio's investment. The betrayal cut deeper because Hudson was not just a co-star. He was someone she thought she knew. "I trusted Rock," she admitted. "We spent years laughing, rehearsing, working side by side. I thought there was honesty between us." Discovering that the image of romance they sold to the world was knowingly false left her feeling manipulated. Today, it wasn't harmless movie magic. It was a violation of her personal integrity. Her resentment hardened over time, especially as the public continued to romanticize their partnership. "People talked about us as if it were real," she once remarked, and I had to smile along with it, knowing it wasn't. That forced silence, another demand of the studio era, became its own form of cruelty. They believed that Hudson, protected by the system, never truly paid the price for the lie, while she carried the emotional burden of it. When Hudson later revealed his AIDS diagnosis in the 80s, Day's emotions grew even more conflicted. She supported AIDS research and showed compassion for the crisis. Yet she did not rush to rewrite history. "I was sorry for him," she said quietly, but that didn't erase what happened. Her words reflected a woman unwilling to let tragedy absolve years of deception. To Doris Day, sympathy did not mean forgetting. In private, she was more direct. "I felt foolish," she admitted. "And I don't like being made a fool of. That sentiment revealed why her feelings toward Hudson were so strong. It wasn't hatred in the simple sense. It was the kind of anger that grows from broken trust, from realizing that a cherished professional partnership had been shaped by a secret she never agreed to keep. Despite Hollywood's desire to immortalize them as a perfect pair, Doris Day refused to romanticize the reality. "What you saw on screen wasn't my life," she said firmly. And it wasn't the truth. In the end, her harshest judgment was reserved not just for Rock Hudson, but for the system that encouraged lies and demanded silence. Still, Hudson remained the face of that betrayal in her memory. Doris Day lived long enough to tell her story on her own terms. And while history may remember her and Rock Hudson as cinematic soulmates, her words remind us that behind the smiles was a woman who felt deeply wronged and never quite forgave it. Doris Day passed away peacefully on May 13, 2019 at her beloved home in Carmel Valley, California at the remarkable age of 97, bringing to a close one of the most enduring and luminous lives in American entertainment. The cause of her death was pneumonia, a quiet ending befitting a woman whose life had been filled with music, laughter, grace, and an unwavering spirit. The news of her passing was shared with the world by the Doris Day Animal Foundation, the charitable organization she had founded and nurtured for decades, reflecting how deeply compassionate advocacy for animals were woven into the fabric of her identity. True to the values she lived by, Doris Day had made her wishes clear long before her passing. She requested that there be no funeral services, no grave marker, and no public memorials. No grand ceremonies or formal goodbyes. Instead, she chose simplicity and privacy, preferring that her life be remembered not through ritual, but through the joy she brought to millions, the kindness she showed to animals, and the timeless body of work she left behind. In declining public observances, Day offered one final poignant reminder of who she truly was, a deeply private woman despite her global fame. Someone who believed that love, laughter, and generosity spoke far louder than monuments or memorials. Though there were no public gatherings to mark her passing, the world mourned her in its own way. Through shared memories, beloved films, cherished songs, heartfelt tributes from fans and fellow artists alike, Doris Day's legacy did not require service or a marker to endure. It lives on in the warmth of her performances, the purity of her voice, and the compassion that defined her later years. Her passing was not an ending, but a gentle farewell from an icon whose presence continues to resonate, reminding generations of a time when optimism, sincerity, and grace shone brightly on screen and beyond. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age. Share this with someone who needs to understand that even America's sweetheart carried wounds that never fully healed. Because Doris Day's story isn't just about the smiles we saw on screen. It's about the price she paid for those smiles, the betrayal she endured, the trust that was broken, and the anger she carried quietly for decades while the world celebrated a romance that, to her, was never real. She gave us joy. She gave us music. She gave us hope. But what Hollywood gave her in return was a lie she could never forgive. And maybe that's the truest thing we can say about Doris Day. That behind the perfect image was a woman who demanded honesty. And when she didn't get it, she never forgot.